Welcome again to Satan's Trilogy. This is Book 1. I am the author and the narrator. I am reading Chapter 4. Looking back into the corner, Mr. Grade studied the girl for a moment. This is the first class in my teaching career that I've had the number of girls equal the number of guys. This offers us a rare opportunity. I like competition, so I'll suggest one. At the end of this semester, if the girls have a higher grade point average in this class than the boys, they can choose a pizza or taco restaurant of their choice for the class to meet and celebrate the end of the semester. Mr. Grade quickly added, "The celebration will be at my expense." Changing his gaze to one of the young boys in the class, Mr. Grade then said, "Of course, if the boys have the higher grade point average, then they can choose which taco or pizza restaurant we meet at for a class celebration." Mr. Grade, while old and in his 60s, enjoyed having fun with the students. He was still sharp and had a quick wit. Esther liked this teacher and decided to suggest an addition to the rules. Raising her hand, Mr. Grade looked at her and said, "Yes." Eddie looked at her and said, "Yes. My name is Esther Saint. This is my first semester at Grant High, and I enjoy challenges too." Taking a moment to allow the instructor in class to focus on her, she continued, "My uncle owns a Chinese restaurant, Shaotin Cuisine. May I suggest my uncle's restaurant as a third option if the winners choose Chinese? Then the evening will be free to everyone, including our teacher." Esther looked at Mr. Grade and he smiled. "This is very generous of you, Esther. Are you certain that your uncle will be agreeable to this?" he asked with some amazement to her suggestion. "Absolutely," Esther said. "My uncle would be extremely happy if the girls chose to enjoy Chinese cuisine." Esther had obviously implied that the girls would be making the choice. Everyone was talking to someone and excited about the challenge. The boys knew that the girls were good, but not knowing their grade point averages, they felt comfortable with the knowledge that males surpass females in mathematics, that is, on the average. Mr. Grade surveyed the classroom and looked pleased at the results of his challenge. Esther's remarks that the girls would be choosing the restaurant was a challenge to the males in the class, and they took it to heart. The books were handed out, and Mr. Grade went over the first course and explained the grading system. He also explained scoring the challenge, which would consist of the highest accumulated number of points between boys and girls. Since there were 6 of each sex, the math would be simple. Highest number of points after 6 tests would decide the winners. The bell rang and everyone jumped from their seats. They were given 12 minutes to walk to the next class. But Esther and her new friends wanted to talk with Raven. They stood at the room exit and surrounded her as she approached the door. They went first. "Hey, Raven. It's good to see you again." Raven had just recently started to shop at Day's father's store and had become casual friends with Day. "I'm glad we have this class together." Having studied her posture, Day understood that Raven was going to be a class act. "We have a club. It's us 5 plus Chris, and we want you to join us. We'll watch out for each other and have some fun at the same time. You don't have to decide now, but after school, we're meeting at Noah's Diner. If you show up, we can get to know each other much better." The new girl looked at Day disinterested, glancing at the other 3 and then Esther. Recognizing Esther from the mall, Raven spoke to Esther. "I know you. You stopped the security guard from shooting at me." Turning to Day, she smiled and said, "I like to be called Raven." It's the name my mother gave me. Raven always felt compelled to clarify her name to others, then added, "Your friend Esther is kick-ass. Consider me in. I'll be at Noah's after school." Each girl hugged Raven and quickly left after saying they would see her at Noah's diner. Esther and Raven left last and walked out together. Raven turned to Esther. "You possibly saved my life. At the time, I didn't give it much thought, but now I want to thank you properly. You stopped something crazy from happening, and I understand you stepped forward to do that. Please consider me your friend. If you do that, I'd be grateful." Raven watched Esther's reaction and waited. Esther smiled at Raven. "You spoke to me at the mall. You called me Blondie. I had a feeling that we would become the best of friends, and I still do." Esther reached forward and gave her a hug. "It may be hard to grasp, but with these girls, you are already one of us." Esther smiled and grabbed her arm as they walked out of the classroom. The first warning bell rang. 6 minutes had passed, and students needed to arrive at their next class in 6 minutes. "I'll see you after school." Esther and Raven both took off down the hallway, but in different directions. With only 6 minutes, both had to hurry to their next class. Esther's concentration to reach her next class was interrupted by an announcement on the school's intercom system. "All students, please go to the stadium. All students, please go to the stadium. There will be a full student body assembly at the stadium for period 2. The voice stopped and everyone changed directions from where they were going to where they now needed to go. Esther knew from her studying the school maps on their website that this stadium was, and she immediately headed there. But of course she needed only to follow the crowd. The stadium held 6,000 people. For school assemblies, everyone went to the southern side. The speakers and stage were always set to address those on the south side. Following the other students, Esther didn't really need to know where the auditorium was, since the crowd would lead her there. The seating was comfortable, wooden seats that were nearly as old as the building. The stadium had originally been used as the assembly hall for a half-dozen different local schools, but over the years they built their own assembly halls and stopped using the hall at Grant High. The rows were steep and everyone could easily see the floor. This building was used for assemblies, basketball, and graduations. Many of the physical education classes were held in this building too. Esther walked slowly into the auditorium with the other students and immediately heard Chris calling her name. He wasn't shy about being heard or standing out as rather loud. Esther looked up and could see him on the second seating level, just 60 feet away or close to it. He obviously wanted her to join him, and so she walked up the aisle to where he was sitting. "Esther, I am so glad to have found you. I want you to sit with me. This is going to be interesting. It's never happened before. I wonder what this is about." Chris sat back, staring at the portable platform set up at the center of the stadium. In less than a minute, Day was entering the stadium and somehow saw Esther sitting with Chris. She headed up to sit with Esther and Chris. Eve, Helen, and Chris all followed. They all seemed amused and were having fun. This would be a great diversion from the monotony of the day. It was always exciting to have the entire school body in the auditorium at the same time. They grabbed Esther once she reached her side and said in Korean, "Sister, this is so exciting. We never have a school meeting like this, not ever." Day sat by Esther's side. that is, after Chris moved down a seat in the row. Eve, Helen, and Chris sat behind them and were having the time of their lives. They all said hi to Esther and Chris, then continued their excited chatter about what was happening. No one understood nor could predict what the meeting would reveal. The electronic experts employed by the school were testing the speaker system. The sound was good, and they were ready to give the go-ahead to the school staff. One technician gave thumbs up to Mr. Mason and then walked off to the side. At least a dozen dignitaries were near the podium, and they seemed as excited as the school body. At that time, Raven walked into the auditorium. Day spotted her immediately. She yelled to her, but by now the auditorium was so loud Raven was unable to hear her. Day jumped up and ran down to greet Raven. Pulling her aside, she pointed at Esther and everyone at the upper level and insisted she join them. Raven was ushered up and the steps with Day at her side. Once they reached their seats, they again had to ask Chris to move down one seat to allow Raven to join them. They had Raven sit next to Esther, and Day sat next to Raven. They all waited and watched the center stage with Mr. Mason discussing something with several of the staff standing close to him. Finally, Mr. Mason moved to the podium and leaned slightly into the microphone. He started to speak. This is truly an amazing day. I have just been told that for the first time, the speaker system is working properly. Not only will all of you be able to hear me at the same time, more importantly, you'll be able to understand what I am saying. The students broke out laughing. They knew exactly what Mr. Mason had meant. Seldom, if ever, did the speakers work properly in the stadium. As the laughter died down, Mr. Mason continued. Each and every one of you will want to pay close attention. What I am about to tell you is something that can change the future of each for you. At that point, the stadium quieted down and all eyes were fixed on the superintendent, Mr. Mason. Mr. Mason gazed at the student body, taking his time to look to both extremes of the auditorium. He then spoke to the students. In a sense, you have all won the lottery. Congratulations. Mr. Mason was thrilled with himself in this secret he was about to reveal. Please allow me to explain. We have always solicited scholarships for our students. Past results have been meager at best. Sometimes we failed miserably with 0 donations made for higher education. Mr. Mason was obviously excited and stopped his address to take a drink of water. 6 weeks ago, I received a phone call from the law office of Unzicker and Brittle, representing a private benefactor to our school's scholarship fund, an amount so large that I am certain no school in the country will ever have it matched. There were a half-dozen meetings in which we came to certain agreements on how the students would qualify, and today we are ready to share the end agreement with all of you. A very generous amount of money has been set aside for our entire school body as it stands today. All of you, and only this group of students, will benefit from this gesture of generosity. Any unused monies will remain with the school for future students. Having taken another drink of water, Mr. Mason continued, each one of you will be guaranteed a higher education on any level that you want. If you wish to attend a mechanic school after graduation, it will be paid for 100%. If you wish to attend a culinary school after graduation, it will be paid for 100%. And of course, if you wish to attend a 4-year university after graduation, Then your expenses will be paid for 100%. Mr. Mason watched the reaction of the students' assembly, and he could tell he had their attention. Mr. Mason continued again. The scholarship fund will pay all expenses, tuition, books, food, and housing, and even transportation if need be. To qualify is simple. Seniors must graduate with a minimum of a C average on their report cards for this present semester. All other students must maintain a C average from this point forward until their graduation. Mr. Mason looked at the auditorium and saw nearly 1,800 students with shocked faces. Allow me to clarify. If you are a senior, you only need to have a C average for this one semester to satisfy the requirements for a higher education scholarship that will pay for all expenses. Mr. Mason took another drink of water and again tried to stress the generosity of this event. Let me repeat myself. All of you have a paid education by maintaining an average grade point of C, calculated from this point forward. We will not be looking at your past scholastic performance. You must maintain a C average from this day forward to qualify. This opportunity is worth upwards of $500,000 per student, depending on where you choose to attend school after graduation and your acceptance to a school of your choice. Mr. Mason took another sip of water and looked at all the students and continued with greater enthusiasm. Very few students have ever been privileged to such a magnificent and generous offer as this. Mr. Mason looked towards the students sitting in front of him, and each felt his gaze. You all need to study this moment. You have an opportunity which gives you the sky as your limit. You can have any school that you wish after you leave here, but you must plan, apply, and be accepted at your school of choice, and you must have the C average. And I believe I'll stop there. That is the end of reading 32. Hope you enjoyed it. Take care. See you soon.